Hi, I'm Jaclyn.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
Welcome back, and we hope you guys had a wonderful Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, winter solstice, other winter holidays.
Do Satanists have a winter holiday? I don't know.
I feel like most religions...
Happy whatever that was.
I feel like most religions do have some kind of winter holiday, so...
Yeah.
If you do, we hope you had a happy one, and however you celebrate, we hope you enjoyed. We hope you enjoyed it safely. Maybe you were able to see people, maybe not, but hopefully it went well.
Hopefully. And I mean, we're coming up on New Year's. Thank goodness. I mean, once it hits 2021, nothing's going to really change. Like, time is just a figment of the imagination. But I still think it'll be good for all of us to put 2020 in the past. I think we need it more than anything. Like,
I agree.
Things are still going to suck come early 2021, but it's going to be a little better.
And I feel like there's more hope for good things happening at some point in 2021 versus by the time we reached like July of 2020, we're like, oh, this shit's not getting better this year.
Yeah, so, we're fucked.
Yeah, so hopefully at some point in 2021 things will get better-ish. I don't know, but
I really hope
we'll see.
I mean, 2020 had some good highlights. I mean, I got engaged.
Yeah.
My niece was born. Like, there were some good highlights.
Definitely.
But
lots
overall,
of happy things.
Overall, we can just put that one in the folder and just put it away.
I mean,
put it under the bed.
I always really appreciate the New Year's holiday anyway, even on good years, just because it's, that like fresh start. And I think we talked about this on a Patreon episode, but you get to like make goals and you get to just, I don't know. It's exciting. Get a new planner. I always like a new planner, and it's all like blank and fresh and so much possibility. And then you look back at like 2020's planner and you're like, I thought there was so much possibility for this year.
Yeah. It's very, I can't think of the word. Like, it's very like sentimental almost, it's just like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's a good way for people to be like, okay, either shit sucked, I'm going to end it. Shit was great, I'm going to continue it. Something like...
Because, I mean, it really means nothing. Like, it's just another day and you just add a number to the year on the date. But there's something special about it to some of us, me included.
Definitely.
But something exciting that is happening at the end of 2020 is they believe that they have cracked the Zodiac Killer code. So that is super exciting.
Yeah, it's super exciting, and I'm like, what if they solve the Zodiac? Because that would make me really happy. That's one of those that I just really, really want to know who it is, or like what happened. Just want to know so bad.
I think all of those like really old crimes that we all know of that were so high profile that have gone unsolved for so long, like finally getting those answers is just so exciting for so many people. So maybe there's progress, and that's going to happen soon.
Yeah. And if it does, we'll cover that one. Like, immediately. If it's solved, we'll put it, top of the list.
Absolutely. It's already on the list.
But now I feel like we have to hold on to it now.
Yeah.
I feel like something's happening.
Just in case, we gotta save that one in case we have some good updates.
I feel the same way about the Delphi murders.
Yes.
I feel like there's something happening in that case, so... We're going to wait on that one and see what happens.
I really hope something is happening in that case because something really needs to happen. So hopefully there's movement.
Yeah, it's so sad. Like, these girls had enough, thought to be like, let me record with this person. Mm-hmm. And we still can't solve it, which it's just sad.
But I've listened and read a lot of things about that case. And I think that they know more, obviously, than they're releasing because it is an open investigation. They don't want to give too much away. So... that makes me hopeful that maybe there's more out there that we will know about it at some point.
From what I've heard, it's a very, very long video. And we've only heard 4 seconds of it. So.
Yes. So hopefully whatever they're hanging on to will be the key whenever that may be. Also in not great true crime news.
Not good.
A case broke this week that is horrifying, so major trigger warning for child death, abuse, general horrors. But in California, a man named Maurice Jewel Taylor was charged with decapitating 2 of his children and living with their bodies for multiple days while starving his other 2 children and making them be around the bodies of their dead siblings. So that is awful.
That's horrible. Like, I don't even have words for that. That's just like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yes, like I said, there are no words. But yeah, if you guys had not heard about that happened. I'm sure there will be more information forthcoming. I do know that they said that the mother was home during all of this, that she is not considered a suspect. So please keep in mind that she is probably also a victim, because I saw a lot of hate towards her online. That's like, what do you mean the mom was home and wasn't a suspect? And I'm like, her husband just decapitated her 2 children. Like,
yeah, and we don't know, like, I'm assuming we don't know really any details. Like, just because she was home doesn't mean that she was, like, seeing it. He could have locked her in a damn closet. Like,
Exactly. But I do know that they found it because there was, like, a gas leak reported. So just my initial thought was, did she somehow get to someone to report a gas? You know, like, something.
She was doing something to try and get, like, attention.
Yeah. I don't know. Super sad. But we do have a pretty long case today with a lot of information. Like we tend to do, we wanted to stick with the theme and give you guys a New Year's murder. So here we go.
Yeah, and this is one that I hadn't really heard of at all.
No.
So when I was just researching, like, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day murders, this came up. And there was a book on Amazon on Kindle Unlimited, and I read it, and it was very good. I do recommend it. It was called The Jefferson County Egan Murders, Nightmare on New Year's Eve, 1964, by Daniel Boyer and Dave Champine. Sorry, guy, if I pronounced your name wrong. But I think it was Daniel Boyer. I'm not sure, but he grew up around this area, and he actually knew one guy who would end up being one of our suspects. That guy was his delivery guy. And one day he disappeared and was like, why isn't he here anymore? It's like, oh, he got arrested. Oh, okay. Cool.
Interesting.
So he had a lot of that, like, small town knowledge. But that's a great book if you want to read it. There's a lot more detail than I put down, but it's good. We also used an Alabama.com article and the Find a Grave website. On December 31st, 1964, Bill and Beverly J. had been on the road for a little over 3 hours to a New Year's Eve gathering with family and friends in Norwood, New York. Bill pulled into a rest area shortly before 9:20 p.m. for a bathroom break just a little north of Watertown, New York. So he noticed a blue 1955 Mercury station wagon that was sitting parked without lights at the edge of the roadway. So Bill was walking to, like, a grassy area, you know, so he can do his business and kind of private. And he glanced at the station wagon and noticed that there was something in the snow on the passenger side. So he walked towards it, and he sees the lifeless body of a woman lying face down in the grass, perpendicular to the car. Which is really not what you want to see.
Not what you expect to see when you're just trying to go take a pee on the side of the road.
Definitely not. Yeah, in the book, it made a joke like, and his wife would never again let him stop to take a pee.
I feel like this has happened multiple times, though, in other cases where a man stopped to pee on the side of the road and discovered a body. So kind of a weird...
There are a lot of cases that are like that. So her head was about 1.5 feet from the vehicle, and so Bill went to reach down, but he stopped and when he noticed a large patch of blood around her head. So thankfully he was like, okay, this is something big, and I'm not going to touch it and disturb it.
Which was smart.
Yes, but he did open the driver's side door, so he didn't touch her, but he did open the door of the station wagon and saw 2 motionless men seated upright, and there was a small dog in the car barking and jumping around. So again, Bill's like, yeah, I'm not touching this. I'm going to go back to his car. He went back to his car and to find a telephone. And again, like we talk about this a lot, there weren't cell phones, and this was like in the middle of nowhere, basically, like off the interstate. And it was really difficult to find public phones because they weren't in sight, and a lot of businesses were closed early because it's New Year's Eve. So they finally found a farmhouse, and the family did let them in to use the phone. So the Jays then were instructed to go to police headquarters, and when police arrived at the crime scene, they found the dead woman wearing Kelly green stretch pants, a darker green imitation suede coat with a turned-up collar, and 1 snow boot. She had long brown hair that was in curlers. An initial examination found at least 1 bullet wound to the head, and the woman was not wearing underwear, but they would later come to find out this was normal for her. So when one of the troopers opened the door, he found the dog, who was a Pekingese?
I think so.
crouched on the top of the front seat's headrest, and the paws were sitting on the shoulder of one of the victims. So the dog actually apparently was very energetic, and they had to try and distract her to be able to like get her out of the car. So she was just kind of protecting her dad, I guess. She was like, I'm not leaving.
Yeah, she's like, no way.
Yeah. So both men were wearing dark winter jackets, sports shirts, and trousers. The victim in the passenger seat was leaning across a padded wooden crutch that was to his side, and it was later found that he had a wooden leg strapped to his left thigh, and his arms were outstretched as if in a pleading gesture. So they did come to find out that these victims were Barbara Egan, 24, her husband Peter, 27, and Peter's brother Gerald, who was 19. So Peter was the one with the wooden leg, and Gerald was in the driver's seat, and they appeared to have been killed execution style. So the victims were well known to the police, particularly in Waterton. They had a very long history of arrests. So Dr. William J. Hall Jr. was the attending physician, and he determined that all three victims had been shot twice in the back of their heads. Dr. Hall and the troopers believed the killer or killers were backseat passengers, and bullet holes were also found in the right lower corner of the windshield, as well as a chip in the rearview mirror, possibly from a bullet fragment, which kind of supported their theory, too, that somebody was in this backseat. So at the scene, Dr. Hall believed the gun used to kill Peter was held within inches of his head and suggested that the bullets passed through his head and into the windshield. But further investigation would also kind of dispute this theory. So Dr. Hall estimated the weapon that killed Gerald was about 2 to 3 feet from his head when fired, and pathologist Richard Lee performed their autopsies, and he found that Gerald was shot once in the right temple with a .25 caliber bullet passing through his brain and skull and becoming embedded in the flesh near his right eyebrow.
That sounds very painful.
Yeah. There was also a through-and-through wound on his right hand that indicated a defensive action as the bullet went to his temple. So I guess they're thinking like he just put his hand up to try and stop it, which sucks that it went through your hand and then...
Yeah.
Ooh. So a second shot entered the back of his neck and exited out his left eye, and 2 shots were fired from a .25 caliber weapon into Peter's left ear. And one of the small bullets exited from his right cheek, and the second crossed through his skull, exiting his right ear. And it seemed that he had turned to look towards the back seat, and so they think it's likely he saw the murder weapon pointed at him. So the bullet hole in the windshield appeared to be from a .38 caliber gun, and Barbara was also shot with a .38 caliber. Police believe that she attempted to run, and 3 quick shots were fired at her from inside the car, missing their target. So this is more the theory they're going with now, instead of the bullets in the windshield were from the exit wounds from Peter and Gerald. Her body showed signs of a struggle, and she had multiple cuts and bruises, particularly on her right foot, left knee, and lower back. Near her body were hair curlers, 2 quarters, a dime, several pennies, and S&H green stamps. So, hadn't heard of S&H green stamps, so I looked it up for you guys. And they were the first ever trading stamps. So the S&H stood for Sperry and Hutchinson Company, and you could collect the stamps in booklets and then trade them in for rewards ordered from the S&H catalogs or stores. So it's kind of like early couponing, I guess, but a little bit more complicated. So these stores were kind of like a department store, and they basically sold everything. Like you could get anything you ever wanted here. You could get new dishes, you could get a gun, you get whatever you want. And it was apparently estimated that 80% of homes collected these stamps during their popularity.
Oh, wow. I'm pretty sure there was an episode of The Brady Bunch where the kids were collecting stamps to go buy something. I don't know. I don't remember the details, but that sounds familiar. I'm pretty sure that happened at some point.
That was definitely during that time, because I think they said it was like peak like 60s, 70s, like when it really was going on. So... So they believe Barbara may have suffered a blow to the head with a blunt object, and she had a deep cut to the bone behind her right ear that resulted in the separation of the skull from the bridge of her nose. Which is just major ouch. This is just all like major ouch.
Again, sounds very painful.
Yeah. So the gash left some brain tissue exposed also. And Dr. Lee also found 3 fingernail punctures on her right wrist, possibly suggesting one of her killers had grabbed her. And one investigator thought it was possible that Barbara fled from the car and her killer tackled her as she crossed the highway and threw her down on the pavement, put his foot on the back of her neck, and fired his gun. Or her gun. Investigators. Anyway, just kidding. But a .38 caliber discharge injured Barbara's left ear and continued out her right ear. And her second shot was a contact wound on the top of her head, and the bullet exited near her left ear. So her body was then dragged from the roadway, leaving blood streaks on the pavement, and was deserted at the location where she was found. So Dr. Hall estimated the shootings occurred shortly before 9 p.m., although police did find at least one witness who'd placed the station wagon at the location about 7:45 p.m. And it's really, really cold this day. I mean, it's late December in New York. It was probably freezing. Mm-hmm. So it's not impossible that the bodies were kind of preserved, and that's going to be hard to determine because, with cold, it delays decomposition, so it's kind of hard to really tell.
And I know that can be difficult even today with more advanced technology, so I'm sure at this point, too, that would make it very difficult to put a more exact time frame on it.
Yeah, definitely, because this was like 64, I think it was, 63, and I don't even think the first, anthropological research facility was founded at that point. None of that had really happened, so it's just kind of we're just going with it. So it was clear that robbery was not a motive, as Barbara's purse containing cash, trading stamps, cosmetics, some unspent .38 caliber bullets, and the car's registration certificate in her name still rested on the rear seat. So they left everything. It appears this wasn't just a robbery gone wrong. And identification documents were found in the men's wallets, with $15 in Peter's wallet. And on the front seat floor, there was a 6-pack of beer with 4 full cans and a 6-pack of Coke, including 1 empty bottle. There was an unused pair of work gloves that were still stapled together, and they were found along with some more hair curlers and the mate to the boot of Barbara's shoe. So 2 guns were used that night, pointing to the possibility of 2 shooters. And this is also 3 people, so you're kind of thinking you might want to be even when you're killing 3 people.
Maybe.
Kind of hard for 1 to take on 3.
Yeah.
So in all, 9 to 10 shots were believed to have been fired, with 3 going into the windshield. And the location of Barbara's body placed her out of sight to passing motorists, so they might not have seen her at all. And there really wasn't much traffic on this highway. The road was still under construction, and it ended about 2 miles north of this rest area, so it wasn't a very commonly used road. I know it was just being formed, so a lot of people didn't really go down it. So investigators theorized that 1 or 2 of the killers rode to the rest area with the Egans as backseat passengers, or they agreed to meet there. And for motives, initial thoughts considered vengeance or that the Egans needed to be silenced, because the Egans do have a bit of a track record, so they're thinking maybe it has something to do with that. There had been little snowfall, so there's no remnants of a second vehicle's tire tracks, but clearly whoever killed them had to get away somehow.
Yeah.
You're in the middle of nowhere, basically. You had to go somewhere. And it was cold and very remote, so it seems likely a second car had to be somewhere. So obviously, the Jefferson County's New Year's Eve massacre made headlines coast to coast. And unfortunately, there really was only one witness to the murder, and that was Queenie, who was the dog who was found there. And it really wasn't likely that she was going to be telling people what happened.
No? You don't think so?
I don't think so. All I can think of is that Black Mirror episode where they can extract the thoughts from your brain and they get it from the hamster. That's what I was thinking. I was if only that was real. So troopers did take her back to headquarters and she went to live with a family member. They hoped maybe one day Queenie could see a potential suspect and maybe bark or something, but unfortunately 2 weeks later she was struck and killed by a vehicle.
Which is so sad.
Yeah, poor. Which is a fun little fact about our research. I had told Jaclyn about little Queenie, sent her a little picture. And the next day she was like, you didn't warn me that the dog dies. And I was like, yes, I did. Thanks, Apple, for not notifying us of messages anymore. So
Yes, because my phone, as I'm sure most people's iPhones have been doing, doesn't always tell you when you have a new message. So she had sent that the night, like I got the message about Queenie, but then I never got the one that she was like, and she died 2 weeks later. So then I was researching it, and I was like, Courtney, you knew the dog died, and you didn't warn me. And she's like, yes, I did. And so she screenshotted it to me, and I was like, whoops.
yeah. Yeah, I think I've noticed with Apple, it's like, if you have a conversation open and then you go do something else, like even go to the home button or something, because I feel like I'll text you and be like, she never replied, and then I'm like, oh. But it's like you're the last person whose messages I had open.
Interesting. Okay.
But I don't know. I don't
I'll
have enough to support this theory.
Then. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very annoying, though, because, like, I don't know if I missed messages, especially with the new update. Sorry, guys, for this sidetrack. But with the new update where you can put, like, your most important messages, like, at the top. So with those, you can't even see, like, what the last message was.
Oh,
so with everyone else, you can kind of see, like, a preview. But with those, it's just, like, a big picture of their face, which is nice when I'm, like, trying to find the people that I text all the time, so I don't have to, like, scroll down or whatever. But those are the people that I'm most likely going to have missed messages from, and I don't know until I open them individually. So
yeah, it's hopefully Apple fixes that soon.
I hope so.
So Bill and Beverly were required to stay at headquarters for a while. They weren't suspects, but they still just needed to be cleared and interviewed for any possible clues they might have seen, just anything they saw that didn't really like raise any flags for them but might be important later. So their children had stayed at a friend's home, and on the morning of January 1st, 1965, the news reported the murder, but Bill and Beverly's children's friend they were staying with misunderstood what they heard. So they go and run and tell the kids that their parents were found dead on the side of the highway. So not great.
No.
Bad communication. So the three kids ran to their grandmother's house, where the grandmother was like, no, it's fine. You're fine. They're just witnesses. They just found them. They're not dead. You're okay. But that must have been terrifying.
Yeah.
And also clearly at a time where they would just say the witnesses' names on TV.
I was thinking about that too. Like, that doesn't seem like a very smart idea, especially in an unsolved case like this at this point.
Yeah, and it actually had a lot of long-term effects on Beverly. She became extremely fearful that the killers were going to come for them.
Yeah.
And state police actually shared that concern as well. And so they actually, would watch the house for a couple weeks because they were like, maybe the killers thought the Jays had witnessed the murder or witnessed something. Like, they didn't really know.
Mm-hmm.
And Beverly actually suffered from nightmares for the most of the remainder of her life from this whole instance.
So sad.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the Egans.
Let's do it.
So let's do it. So Peter Egan was born on May 15th, 1937 to Peter and Leona Egan. And Peter had an arrest history dating back to when he was 13 years old, and he was charged in a car theft investigation in 1951. So from the time he was 13 and all growing up, he's a little thief.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't keep his hand out of the honey pot. Is that what the saying is? Anyway.
Something like that.
Or the cookie pot. Maybe that makes more sense. Anyway. So, when he was 19 years old, Peter spent 8 months on the West Coast, but then he decided he wanted to hitchhike back home to Watertown. And on February 17th, 1957, near Winnemucca, Nevada, I probably pronounced that wrong. I'm sorry. The car he was riding in went off a road and crashed. He was ejected and suffered fractures in both legs, his shoulder, and his back. So, following hospitalization for 3 weeks in Humboldt, Nevada, he was transported by train to Syracuse where he met his parents. So, once he got to Watertown, he went to the hospital there and they revealed that gangrene had developed, which forced them to amputate his left leg above the knee on March 11th, 1957. So, we mentioned how Peter had that wooden leg, and this is why. Mm-hmm. So, Peter was still on crutches when on July 3rd, 1958, he got married to Barbara Vout. So, Barbara Vout was born on June 17th, 1940, to Raymond and Irene Vout, and she'd only just graduated high school a few weeks earlier from Adams Center High School. And she was considered to be one of the prettiest girls in her southern Jefferson County hometown of Rodman. She was employed at the W.T. Grant department store in Watertown at the time. So the couple was aware they were about to face some issues quickly into their marriage, so Peter had an appointment to report on the first day of October for admission to the West Haverstraw Rehabilitation Hospital for plastic surgery relating to his leg amputation. So they knew it wasn't going to be all rainbows and sunshines for the first few months.
They're like, we got a lot of things that we're starting out with here.
Yeah.
So Barbara's marriage to Peter came as a surprise to many of her high school classmates. They said that she just totally went overboard and it was just really out of character for her. One classmate described her as cute, adorable, smart, personable, sweet, and athletic. And they said in high school that she was just a really good girl. She never swore or stole. Barbara was a cheerleader and a saxophonist in the school band, played field hockey, and was also a member of a library club, which I don't know what a library club is, but that sounds like my kind of club.
Yeah, I want to join that club.
Yeah, definitely. So she was very popular and made friends easily, and she had a serious boyfriend named Jerry Brown, whom she even bought furniture with because they planned to get married. And the classmate said that, quote, Barbara had so much personality and so much to live for, but then she met Pete. So one of her...
Womp, womp, womp.
Womp, put in the sound effect. One of her friends, Kay Hutchings Vargas, said she observed changes in Barbara even before Peter came along. She said Barbara started showing just a mischievous nature. She was even joining in when a friend was shoplifting, and Kay says she was just getting in trouble at school, and the principal actually told Kay's parents that she would be better off finding new friends instead of Barbara so she could stay out of trouble. But Kay was actually the one who made the connection for Barbara and Peter. So Kay was dating a friend of Peter's, and it was through them that Barbara met Peter at a YMCA dance in Waterton. And Kay said that Peter was a notorious bad boy, and Barbara ultimately left her boyfriend Jerry for Peter.
We all love a bad boy.
Don't we all?
Especially when we're like 18.
Yes. Every 18-year-old loves a bad boy. So a classmate said Barbara completely changed once she started dating Peter, and according to this classmate, Peter was a horrible person, very antisocial, and looked dangerous. And I'm sorry I'm laughing at the next line because I laugh every time I read it. So this classmate was quoted as saying he had a, quote, little man complex because he was so small and only had one leg. So that's why he was always starting fights.
He was trying to prove something.
So,
although I do know someone who had like straight up little man complex, and I can see it.
it makes sense.
They have some issues,
they do.
For sure.
So clearly this classmate just did not like Peter very much. And former reporter Jim Brett said in a 2006 interview that Peter Egan was bad news and had nothing to offer society, and he had no good qualities that I know of. So people just really do not like Peter.
I know, I read that and I was like, oh my goodness, dude.
Goodness. So as Barbara was getting close to graduation, she no longer hung out with her friends, and she was still friendly with them, but she really just hung out with Peter and his friends. So her friend Kay would play alibi for her and tell Barbara's parents that she was with her when she was actually with Peter, but their parents eventually caught on and they were pretty upset with them, which, I mean, haven't we all done that?
Yeah.
So they were also unhappy when Barbara married Peter, and a lot of people suspected that they were smoking weed, but actually one of their friends said that Peter was prescribed a strong pain medication for his leg, and Barbara was using it as well. So obviously a lot worse than weed, and Barbara also took up drinking with Peter. So Barbara quickly gave birth to 3 sons. The first was born in 1959, the second in 1961, and the third in 1962. So pretty quickly we're popping out a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like you guys know, I'm pregnant right now and I don't want to do this again next year. I'm going to have to take a little break here.
Yeah, your uterus needs to recover.
Yes, definitely. Many classmates and friends say that their house was filthy and that their boys frequently had dirty diapers and they were dirty as well. So Peter's brother Gerald was born on July 22nd, 1945, and he was remembered as a class clown in elementary school, was just always in trouble. He was a well-known thief, like even bigger than Peter, and reporter Jim Brett said that Gerald was Peter's legs. So basically Peter would send him to do his dirty work of stealing while Peter sat in the car. So pretty smart, Peter. I mean, that works for you.
Yeah.
So at this time, Peter was building up to his arrest record with 13 arrests and the reputation of being a burglary ringleader, but he was never convicted of this. So the police knew a lot of their activities, but they had no evidence to prove it to be able to charge them. But the Egans were frequently stopped by police when they were out. So on April 1st, 1962, Waterton police came across a male motorist who almost hit a patrol car. They avoided the collision and began to try to stop the reckless driver. But surprise, surprise, this driver did not stop. So the chase began at 2:15 a.m. heading out of Waterton and going north on New York State's Route 12 at speeds reaching 80 miles per hour, which at this time I'm sure was very fast because cars didn't go very fast.
Yeah.
So 7 miles into the chase, they noticed that the driver switched positions with his female companion, and now she was driving. Which, I want to know how you can switch positions in the car at 80 miles per hour.
And not unless he used his wooden leg, he just took it off and kept it on the gas.
I was thinking that would make it more difficult, but that actually might make it easier because you could just kind of
Whoop.
get it stuck there and then switch over.
Yeah, but I have no
Spoiler
idea
alert,
how you
Courtney,
switch.
I didn't say they were the ones driving.
We're just telling you a random couple.
Just telling you about this car chase. So the chase continued uninterrupted for another 18 miles. So at this point, they attempted to make a turn, heading the wrong way down a one-way road. But the driver was unable to maintain control, and she slid into a utility pole. Obviously, the drivers were Barbara and Peter Egan.
Spoiler.
There were no injuries in this crash. Apparently, the switching of the drivers was a common maneuver by this couple to keep Peter from being charged with driving while his license was suspended. Police also found a large quantity of merchandise ranging from spark plugs to wallets and trousers in their trunk. So they were arrested on reckless driving charges, and Peter was charged with driving without a license, and Barbara was also charged with permitting unlicensed operation of her car. So no record was found on whether they were charged with anything in relation to what was found in the trunk, but 5 or 6 years earlier, Peter had been a suspect in a burglary in New York State, and the police had a warrant charging him with the break-in, but the charge was dropped because of his leg injury from the car accident in Nevada. So in October of 1963, there was another car accident, and at this accident, Peter said that before he was locked up again, he would shoot it out with the police. So got a little Bonnie and Clyde stitch going on here.
Yeah, I'm getting some serious vibes.
So after this, Barbara and Peter settled into a very transient lifestyle. They moved around a lot. A lot of times they just stopped paying rent, so they had to find another place. Barbara kept shoplifting, and one of their acquaintances even said it got so bad that the three were not allowed in any Waterton stores because they're like, nope, you got to go. We know what you're doing here. Barbara was also charged in a forgery investigation, and after pleading guilty to a reduced charge, was sentenced to probation and reportedly turned to sex work. So Peter would drive her down to Camp From, which was a National Guard training ground near Waterton, and the three frequented bars and were often in fights as well. So Kay and Barbara's brother both reported that she felt trapped in the relationship and she just couldn't get out of it, and there were reports of abuse towards Barbara by Peter. And Peter and Barbara were receiving public assistance benefits, which was really their only visible income. But despite that, Peter was very generous in bars, constantly buying drinks for others and flashing large rolls of bills. And he would even occasionally grant loans as much as $4,000 to $5,000, which is a lot today if that were today's money. But in today's money, that's about $40,000. So,
yeah.
I don't know anyone.
They said there was one person alone who owed him $2,000.
Crazy.
And Barbara was very upset with this too. She was like, we'd have so much more money if you would just stop handing it out.
Stop giving people all your money.
Really?
Man, I wish I had friends.
$40,000, you could buy a house.
Loan me $40,000. So police suspected the Egans in a lot of burglaries and thefts, especially since they had such large amounts of cash. So in early 1963, they were removed from the county's welfare rolls because they're like, clearly you're getting money from somewhere else, so you don't need this. So they had to live off of alternative means for the next several months. And for most of the last several months of their lives, Peter, Barbara, and their 3 sons lived somewhat secluded from law enforcement in a house near Muskellong Lake, nearly 30 miles northeast of Waterton. But again, they were evicted for not paying rent. So after they left there in November 1964, the owner found the house just left in shambles. They just did not give a shit. And their final home was in Campbell's Point, just off the eastern shores of Lake Ontario, a few miles west of Waterton. So at this point, there were rumors circulating that there was a hit out against Peter because of a burglary that was just too close to home. and it was believed that he stole $1,000 in that burglary, and the victim reportedly said, quote, "Peter is a dead man if he doesn't return the money." So a man named Joseph Leon frequented with the Egans and said a few weeks before Christmas that he would have to kill Peter to keep him quiet and keep all of us from going to jail. So he said Peter knew enough to put all of them away for several years, but no one really thought that Joe was serious with his threats. However, Joe did have a motive for revenge. On December 20th, his father's house was broken into, and a family heirloom diamond ring valued at several $100s was stolen, along with $760 in cash. And Joe was just convinced that it was the Egans. So he told James Pickett, who was a reporter who's frequently brought up with this investigation because he knew the Egans, that he needed to help lure the Egans to the rest area on the new interstate highway to keep them from being suspicious. So the Egans knew and trusted James because he had participated in a few burglaries with them. So a truck was scheduled to travel this road on New Year's Eve headed to Canada with liquor valued at up to $16,000. So the Egans would pay $1,000 to drive to the rest area where they would assist James in hijacking the truck, and James would drive away in the truck. And Peter and Gerald agreed to the deal, but on New Year's Eve, Gerald tried to back out. He was on parole for a disorderly conduct charge, so maybe he was just scared of violating his probation and was like, maybe this isn't a good idea. So according to acquaintances, they doubted that Peter would let someone sit behind him in the car and get the jump on him. So he was just way too observant to allow something like that to happen unless it was someone that he really trusted. So they believe it's possible that conspirators rode to the place in a second car. And as the plans for New Year's Eve were forming, the Egans spent a lot of money shopping. So they spent several $100s in cash on merchandise at Century Wholesale Supply Company, but it's unknown exactly what they bought. A neighbor also said they saw them in a discount store on December 31st as well. So at this point, law enforcement were closing in on the Egan family. So the FBI were snooping around and were worried that the Egans were aware of it. So Peter, who had been discharged on December 2nd from Jefferson County Jail after a short stay for public intoxication, was not aware of this investigation. So on December 22nd, 2 days after the Leon burglary, authorities were notified by an attorney about a suspicious car being stored in a hay barn not far from Waterton. So the property owner, Clifford Carr, which is funny, had consulted with his attorney after being concerned that the Egans failed to show up with proper registration for the car. So they soon discovered that the car was stolen, surprise, from an economy rent-a-car in Miami, Florida. And police found the 1962 red and white Chevrolet convertible covered with a tarp and hidden behind junk in the barn. So a teenager had stolen the car and driven it to Waterton and traded it to the Egan brothers for an older model Pontiac. So the brothers then traded the car to a man named Eric Farr for a 1945 Willys model Jeep. So the Jeep was signed over to Barbara, and on the sales receipt it said, quote, "Received payment in full for 62 Chevrolet convertible." And the receipt was dated October 1st, 1964. So Farr towed the convertible to Carr's place to install a fuel pump and store the car pending completion of the state's registration process. So Carr did not suspect the car to be stolen, and he placed it against a wall in his barn to make room for machinery that he needed to store. So no charges were brought against the buyer, perhaps in exchange for his willing to help police.
Which I thought was such a weird story,
Yeah.
You're worried about the registration, and then you're like, oh, this car's stolen. What?
Yeah, it doesn't quite add up.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff, and I mean, maybe it's just the dealings of shady people where you're just like, what are you thinking? What are you doing?
Yeah.
So as the final days of the year passed, a rumor persisted that someone was out to get the Egans. And according to trial testimony and interviews, here's how the final hours for the Egans played out on New Year's Eve. Peter rushed into the Windmill Cafe, a bar he was frequently at. He was extremely nervous and excited and said he needed to borrow a shotgun. He was worried about repercussions for burglarizing a home that they shouldn't have more than once. And possibly the death threats were getting to him, and when Peter did leave this bar, he was apparently still unarmed. I guess he didn't get that shotgun.
Guess no one loaned it to him.
Yeah. At around 4:45 p.m., Peter and Gerald went to the Rotary gas station and talked with a few friends, including Joe Leon and James Pickett. Gerald was trying to avoid the events that night for a date, and in the meantime, they were talking about celebrating New Year's Eve after the night's mission was completed. So Peter invited Leon and Pickett to join him and Barbara at a Watertown bowl. So they're going to go to the bowling alley to celebrate the New Year's.
What you do on New Year's.
Isn't that so small town?
It is.
But Leon declined, saying he never cared about going out on New Year's Eve. Well, sir, do you not like champagne? Anyway, so Peter reportedly said, might as well have a good time because tonight may be my last night.
Interesting.
Eerie.
Foreshadowing.
So the gathering soon moved to the Red Moon Diner, and Barbara showed up around 6. She made a $2 gas purchase and picked up the Egan brothers. She had at least one, but possibly all 3 kids with her. They're not exactly sure. But they did drive to Peter's mother, Leona's house, and dropped off one of the children. And when they left, they did not indicate where they were going. And at some point, Barbara delivered 2 of her sons to a babysitter's house and put her hair in curlers, getting ready for the night out. I don't really know why they separated them.
That was so weird to me. Like, when I was reading this, I was like, Courtney, I don't understand. Why would you take one child to grandma's house and then take the other 2 to a babysitter? Like, something doesn't add up here.
Yeah, because they're all around the same age.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't imagine one would, like, I don't know. I mean, maybe one had separation anxiety and wouldn't go with the babysitter and only with grandma. But why wouldn't you leave all 3 with grandma? I don't know.
Right?
Grandma's like, I'll take 1, not 3.
Right. She's
okay.
Like, no, I ain't taking all those kids. I'll take 1.
So Barbara's car had a leaking gas tank, and even after she purchased about 7 to 8 gallons at the gas station, her husband spent another $2 on gas at about 7:30 p.m. At this point, Gerald went inside the station and he bought 2 pairs of work gloves, a 6-pack of beer, and a 6-pack of Coke. And Peter and Barbara were reported to have remained in the car. So after the murders, only 1 pair of gloves was found in the car. So police are really wondering, like, if we find this other pair of gloves, can we solve the murder? Like, can we find someone who has them? And Peter was seen talking to someone in a late model blue Chevrolet sedan. And this is the last time the 3 were seen alive, and it's presumed the 3 then left for the interstate towards the rest area. So the time of their deaths would be estimated at that point by Dr. Richard Lee to be about 7:30 p.m. or shortly after. Later that evening, Leona Egan was at the Windmill Cafe. She liked her booze and frequented the taverns around town, and she cried out hysterically, "They killed them! They killed my boys! They're both dead at the hospital." I don't know where her grandchild that she was watching is at. I don't know how she found out. I don't know if she had mother's intuition, but that's just a little interesting tidbit.
Well, maybe that's why she only gets 1 child, because they're like, well, you're going to go out drinking, so you can't have all 3. I guess you can have 1.
This one's the oldest. He can maintain it himself.
Don't know where you put him in the meantime. But...
Yeah, I don't know. It is the 60s. So.
True.
James Pickett denied being a part of the murder, and he said he had become aware of the triple homicide when a special bulletin was aired that night on the news. And he said he knew right away Joe Leone had killed them. So, James had breakfast on New Year's Day at the Red Moon Diner with Leone and his girlfriend Beth. And he said Leone acted surprised when James told him about the Egans murder, and he acted like it was the first time he'd heard it. And then 3 or 4 days later, James and Leone were at the diner again, and Leone admitted to James that he committed the murders to keep them quiet and named an accomplice, Willard Belcher. Now, this is all James' statements, so just keep that in mind. So, a few days after the murders, the police narrowed down their suspects to 4 names: Joe Leone, James Pickett, Willard Belcher, and Willard's wife, Bertha. Now, Bertha. She was a sex worker at the age of 80.
Yes.
80.
Bertha is
she was
quite a character, guys.
She's interesting. But it would be years before any arrests were made and before only one of them would be brought to trial. A single funeral service was held for Peter, Barbara, and Gerald on January 5th, 1965, and the caskets were open even though all 3 had been shot in the head.
That doesn't sound like a good time.
No, it doesn't. So, for over a year, 2 state police investigators, Ray Pollitt and Charlie Donahue, spent their shifts, sometimes together, sometimes in rotation, in a cellar, eavesdropping in hopes of hearing something incriminating by suspects in the Egan murders. So, an informant allowed use of his house that was 2 blocks away from the Belcher house. So, the cops had burglarized the Belcher's house and planted a bug in the sofa frame. However, all this work, no good information came from it. But Ray and Charlie did know that the most entertaining were calls taken by Bertha with her lovers, all close to her age. I guess she was like the original, like, sex line that you could call. I don't know. So many people who were interviewed in regards to the Egan murders did drop the Belchers and Joe Leone's names. So a lot of people thought they had something to do with it. Joe Leone did give a statement to police on January 3rd, 1965, during which he made claims about his whereabouts at the time of the murder. And within the first month of investigation, police said at least 500 people were questioned. And to rule out the possible link due to drug trafficking, the Buffalo branch of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics joined the probe. So they're like, let's just make sure there's no, like, outside sources going with it. So, and the Egans were known gamblers, and known gamblers in the area were also checked, but this all proved to be a dead end in search for the motive. They didn't really find anything else that could be some outside source. So, the quest for a motive was confounded by Peter's habit of bragging about his activities. So he had a very vivid imagination in some stories he told. So Donahue had a theory of what happened. He thought the killer blew his top, shot Peter on the spur of the moment, and then had to finish off the others. But then, why were they here? That's my question.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how did they get here?
But why?
Yeah. So, several people questioned agreed to take lie detector tests, and Leone was among them. And he consented on May 8th, 1965, after police said they didn't believe his account of activities based on the information they had. And he was administered the polygraph in July 1966, and he and everyone else who were given the polygraph did pass it. We know these aren't super reliable, but that is still something to note that he did pass it. So, Leone had been a standout football player in high school. He was a nice driver salesman for Wonder Bread who gave treats to kids along his route. So, I mentioned the author knew one of the suspects. It was Joe Leone. His niece called him her favorite uncle. He was a good man and a great uncle. He was described as mild-mannered, friendly, not a drinker. He was never in fights. He was very popular. Everyone wanted to be his friend. And at the time of the murder, Leone was separated from his wife, Anita, and was living with his girlfriend, Beth. So he's just getting around. Leone and Peter were longtime friends, and they used to be neighbors as kids. So, little Miss Bertha, she had a bit of a criminal history, including operating a sex workhouse. And according to one of her nieces, she was just a mean lady and ran a lot of houses of ill repute. She said she was just mean and unfriendly to all the kids. But Willard was described as kind, outgoing, and a fun person to be around, according to his niece. A lot of nieces in this story talking about their aunts and uncles.
Right.
So Ray Paulette said that Willard hated him and would frequently say he would kill him, but Paulette would just respond by saying, "You're too nice of a guy to do that."
Okay.
So I guess Willard was just, even to the police, known as a nice person. So Willard only had one encounter with the law before the Egan murder. In November 1962, he was accused of assaulting his boss, and he pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct. So, within a few days of the murder, Earl William Bennett was taken in for questioning. And searching the Egan's house, they found a .38 caliber Colt revolver handgun and a .32 caliber semi-automatic rifle. So the handgun was not used in the murder, but the rifle had been stolen. And apparently Bennett had sold the rifle to Peter for $15 10 days before the murders.
Interesting.
So I guess that was just like a little tidbit. I don't really think anything comes from that more than to just establish more of a timeline. So 14 days after the murder, more burglary arrests were made, and one of the suspects had a story to tell.
Ooh.
So Dale Glynn, which is an alias assigned by the authors of the book, told the story of the Egan crime circle. So he dropped the names that eventually led to the Paulette and Donahue's eavesdropping. And Glynn said he was a part of at least 40 burglaries in association with the Egans. He couldn't recall all, but was able to list at least half. Which, this helped solve a lot of the recent burglaries, but it didn't assist in the murder investigation. And in the book, too, I don't think I wrote the numbers down, but they said, like, after the Egans, like, were murdered, like, the burglary rates, like, just dropped completely in the area. Like, it just basically all stopped. So, now 18 months pass with no news in the Egan investigation. They're doing like the eavesdropping, nothing's coming for it. And then on the first anniversary of their death, the police chief said there were a few people they were looking into, and he said the murders were a local problem linked to burglaries, narcotics trafficking, gambling, and a gangland hit had been ruled out. They think it was someone they knew. And in July 1966, the eavesdropping did come to an end when Willard and Bertha's son discovered the bug and pulled it out.
Whoops.
Whoopsie, didn't hide it good enough. So the police decided to spring into action with the one solid lead they had, and Willard Belcher was arrested on the charge of receiving stolen property. On the day of his arrest, the police say Bertha gave them permission to search the home. So they did find a .45 caliber pistol on the floor and bullets as well. The gun was determined not to have been the one involved in the Egan murders, and Willard and Bertha were charged with illegal possession of a firearm, but the count was eventually dropped because they thought it was based on an improper search and seizure methods. So I guess Bertha's coming back being like, I didn't give you permission.
Nope, just
Whatever.
kidding.
Just kidding. So Willard still went to prison on the attempt to receive property charges, and he was sentenced to a term of 2.5 to 3.5 years. They didn't have him for the murder, but they did kind of have him in a good position to search deeper. You know, maybe they could interview him more. There's no chance he's running anywhere because he's in prison.
Yep.
So on the second anniversary of the Egan's death, the police confirmed that an offer of immunity from prosecution was being considered for the murder accomplice who turned on the others. So with this threat, they were really hoping that like each of the killers were going to be scared that they would turn on each other, and maybe all of them would come in to try and get that immunity before like their accomplice did. So they reviewed the recordings from the bug in the Belcher's house, but it was a dead end. Investigators went back to Dale Glenn, who told them you should interview James Pickett. So James Pickett had been interviewed since he was friends with the Egans, but he had no criminal record. He was a family man and the father of 2 boys and 2 girls. So, you know, if you're a dad, you can't be a criminal.
Of course not. Dads never kill people.
Never. And don't listen to our case from last week.
Nope.
So they brought him in for questioning, but he really wasn't cooperative. So on March 23rd, 1968, James Pickett was arrested for hindering prosecution, and the arrest marked like a major break in the Egan murder case and did result in new information. So they were like expecting more arrests in the future. And on March 24th, they arrested Joe Leone and Bertha Belcher. Ooh, that's like a hard name to say.
Yep.
So James Pickett said in an interview before his death that Bertha was arrested because the murders were all her idea and she ran the show. And he said everyone just did what she said. And he said that she disposed of the bloody clothes and the weapons the night of the murder. So on March 27th, Willard Belcher was arrested, but it was unlikely he would face prosecution because several months earlier, he'd been committed to a state hospital for the criminally insane. And at this time, the charges against James Pickett were dropped because Leone and Bertha had been arrested. So Bertha was released on bail, but Leone stayed in the county jail, and when he was reported to be a model prisoner. Apparently he was very nice, very respectful, never had any issues with him. So diving efforts were conducted in April 1968, and again in August in the vicinity, but the guns were never found, and Pickett said this because they didn't look in the right place, but he said it way more aggressively. He said they didn't look in the right goddamn place. So he was very angry.
So the grand jury indictment issued on May 8th, 1968 excluded Willard and Bertha from prosecution. So the grand jury determined that there was insufficient evidence to continue the charges against the couple. There were many pretrial hearings on what would and wouldn't be allowed in court. So the prosecution was specifically trying to suppress Leone's lie detector test results. So this was before we knew how unreliable they could be, and they stopped being allowed in trials. So the defense brought in F. Lee Bailey, and we know that name from Sam Shepard, Patty Hearst, and O.J. Simpson, just in case you were wondering. So F. Lee Bailey only came in for the pretrial hearing about the lie detector test. We believe the lie detector test wasn't allowed, but it wasn't completely clear which way they went with that.
It was very difficult in the book to kind of determine. I mean, from what it sounds like the judge said it would absolutely like bias the jurors.
Mm-hmm.
Like it would go in their head and it would be significant to them. So I don't think they allowed it, but also not sure.
Mm-hmm. So the trial for Joe Leon began on January 5th, 1970 for 3 counts of first-degree murder. So this was to be the highest profile case to be aired in the building since it was erected in 1862. The jury consisted of 9 men and 3 women and 3 alternates. The foreman of the jury was William Fletcher. So Fletcher was a former member of the Watertown Police Department and was a cop when the Egan burglaries were occurring and was still on the job when their murders occurred. So, not quite sure how he made the jury.
Yeah.
No conflict of interest there? Guess not. So, District Attorney Bill McCluskey began his opening statement by saying how Barbara could have survived the murders. She ran away, but Leon brought her back and shot her while she begged for her life. So, this statement came from James Pickett, who said that Barbara was sent away in the car that Leon drove. And Barbara drove away from the rest area, stayed away for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then returned to discover what had happened. So again, this is what James Pickett said. So McCluskey told the jurors that Leon and his accomplice intended, premeditated, and deliberated the murders, and that they occurred around 6 to 7:30 p.m. Then the defense took the stand and said that McCluskey's theory had no factual background. He said Leon was not at the scene and that they would show that Leon was in the city that night. So the prosecution's star witness was James Pickett, who testified that Leon told him he committed the murders 2 to 3 weeks after. And James said he had been recruited to play a role in the murder scheme, but he declined because he had company at home because his mother-in-law was visiting. So, not that he wanted to decline participation in the murder, but, he was just a little busy at that time.
I gotta, say hi to my mother-in-law.
So he didn't believe at the time that Leon would actually carry it out. And the defense brought up Pickett's recent arrest and questioned whether Pickett was saying whatever the police wanted him to in exchange for being cleared of his charges. So something a little interesting happened in the trial when McCluskey called a witness to the stand who reported seeing the Egan brothers as late as 7:30 p.m. So this directly conflicted with McCluskey's opening statement that they were dead by 7:30. So a lot of witnesses were called to detail timeline, autopsies, etc., but McCluskey did have a mystery witness. Ooh. Dun, dun, dun. So Robert Prey came in, and the first day that he was there, he refused to speak and take the oath, and he told the judge, quote, "Got nothing to say, Your Honor."
Okay. At least he's polite.
Right? So after the weekend, Prey suddenly had a change of heart and did decide to testify. So he said that Leon confessed to him in jail that he killed the Egans. So the defense, Paul Shanahan, quickly jumped in requesting him to detail his long criminal history, including a current pending conviction. So they also brought up the possibility that he was getting a deal for his testimony, and Prey said, quote, "I don't think so." And he was also asked why he wouldn't testify the last time, and he just said, "I was sick and had to have a doctor. My stomach was bad." So you can't talk? Okay.
Okay.
Whatever you say. So he was asked whether anyone visited him over the weekend, and he said he was visited by McCluskey and state police investigator Charles Donahue, and he gave them an oral statement that was recorded.
Interesting that, the prosecution just comes and visits you, and then suddenly you're willing to testify.
Now you have something to say. And recordings cannot be stopped and started. That's not a thing that happens ever.
Never, no. It couldn't be like, hey, be sure we're about to interview you and turn this on and make sure, you say everything.
And go. So after Shanahan finished questioning Prey, he asked for dismissal of all charges against Leon, arguing that there was a lack of credible evidence to corroborate the testimonies of Prey and Pickett. But this motion was denied. So Shanahan called many character witnesses to talk about Leon. Leon's girlfriend Beth said that Joe had returned home at about 7 p.m. on New Year's Eve and remained home for the rest of the evening. So McCluskey was able to poke a few holes in her testimony, though. And the last witness called to the stand was Leon himself. And Leon detailed his day and how he was home at 7 p.m. Leon said he had first heard of the murders on January 1st at the diner with Pickett. And in regards to Prey, he said that he had seen him in jail but denied having a conversation with him. And during cross-examination, Leon did say he had a short conversation with Prey about how he had seen Willard in prison. And Leon also denied any involvement in the burglaries with the Egans, and his testimony only lasted about an hour. So Shanahan said there is no evidence to warrant a verdict of guilty to any crime. And the judge adjourned for the day and said that they would continue on Wednesday, January 21st. So that night, phone calls were made to the homes of 4 jurors. 1 juror and 3 wives of jurors picked up their phones to hear a male caller's voice speaking in a foreign accent say, quote, "If Joe Leone is found guilty, you are dead." End quote.
Not jury tampering at all.
No, definitely not. For sure. So the judge interviewed all the jurors, and police investigated, but the identity of the caller was never determined. But the judge was convinced that the jurors were not influenced by this threat, so at 3:45 p.m., they were sent out of the courtroom to deliberate. So they did reach a decision in an hour and 55 minutes, and the jury did find Leone not guilty on all 3 counts. And it was later revealed that it was decided on their second count because the first count was 11-1 not guilty.
Yeah, and there's a lot more details about the trial in the book. I really tried to summarize it because I mean, we're already at a pretty long episode right now.
Yes.
And there was a lot, but yeah, it's super interesting. Definitely go read the book because, I mean, it's really interesting, all of that. And
more details that we can...
Yeah, and it's just crazy, you know, that you get, like, suddenly you all get these calls. Like,
right?
Like, what is happening? But I definitely see why they found him not guilty. I mean, it's based on one person's statement.
Exactly. Yeah, I get it. So Pickett's older daughter said that she doesn't believe her father was truthful and that he shouldn't be trusted. And in July of 2014, she broke her silence, saying that he may have lied about his whereabouts the night of the murders. She believes that her father was near the scene of the murders and likely witnessed the murder of Barbara Egan. So Pickett said he had backed out of the scheme to murder the Egans, like we said, because his mother-in-law was visiting for the holiday. So his mother-in-law was indeed visiting, but his daughter Joanne says that he went out that night and didn't come home until after midnight. She said that she was 12 years old and she remembers it and there's no doubt in her mind. Which, I mean, I don't know. I don't remember a lot of things from when I was 12 years old, but to say, like, without a shadow of a doubt, I know that this exact night is when this happened, when I was 12 years old.
But you also have to think, like, people that your father knew were also murdered that night, so it probably stands out more than just any other New Year's Eve.
That's true.
And
that is true.
It is like a holiday, and so that's what I was wondering, too, if it's like, oh, well, you said you were home at this time, but I know you weren't, and then she remembers that for, like, the rest of her life, maybe?
Yeah, that is true. So Joanne gathered all of the information she had about the murders from her mother and grandmother, and she was told that he was instructed by Leone to take Barbara out of here. So Pickett may have accompanied Barbara in leaving the rest area, either walking or in a car. So supposedly she heard gunshots and ran back, according to what Joanne was told. And Leone apparently fired 3 .38 caliber shots from the backseat of the car through the windshield, aiming at Barbara. He then ran towards her, chased her, flung her to the ground by her hair, stomped on her head and neck, and shot her, which was one of the theories that the police had. And the .38 caliber weapon had been stolen in a burglary, according to Pickett. But police, of course, had no way of confirming any of these details because Joanne supposedly heard this from her mom and her grandma, who would have supposedly heard it from him, and what can you do with that without anything to back it up? So the public can really only speculate what happened that night. So the Pickett name never came up publicly in the murder investigation until his arrest on March 23rd, 1968, when he was accused of withholding information. So Joanne said that police questioned her mother and grandmother, but she doesn't know what they learned from them. So they may have destroyed his alibi, prompting his arrest. And Joanne confirms that James was a part of a lot of burglaries, and they would even bring the stuff that they got to their house to divide it up. So James Pickett was also having many affairs. He lived with his wife, Joanne's mother, Dolores, but he also had a long-term girlfriend who he had children with, as well as relations with many other women. His daughter Joanne also says that he sexually molested her from the ages of 12 to 18, and that it only stopped because she moved away from home. She said that she was afraid of her father and that he constantly threatened her, and once he got so angry that he threatened to cut her face up with a knife, and he said, quote, "I'll make you ugly and nobody will ever want you." She said her brother was frequently physically abused by their father and would beat him with a belt as well. And Dolores divorced James in 1976. Joanne says that her mother knew about the sexual abuse but never did anything about it. And after figuring out that her mother was aware of it, she didn't speak to her again for the rest of her life.
And that really kind of like everyone's like, James Pickett, he's this family man. He's a dad. He's never done anything wrong. So I think she's definitely kind of like breaking up that idea that maybe he might have had a little bit more to do with it than he's leading on.
She's like, no, the perception you have of him is not accurate. So in 2013, James Pickett said in a phone interview that he, quote, had forgotten about the murders. And in the interview, he never referred to the Egans by their first names, only he and she for Barbara and Peter, and he referred to Gerald as young Egan. So it just seemed like he had completely, obliterated them from his memory. He said that he hadn't thought about it in 40 years. So...
Which I think is suspicious, too.
Yes.
That, to me, seems like something who had something involved. You won't say their names, and you're like, I haven't thought about it in 40 years. They were your friends.
Exactly.
I think if my friends were murdered, I would remember it.
You wouldn't just be like, oh yeah, I knew those people that were brutally murdered, and, I was a part of the trial, and, all of that. No,
yeah, I was the key witness.
Forgot about that.
I was arrested. What?
So, James Pickett did die on April 15th, 2013, and Joe Leone and his girlfriend Beth relocated out of Waterton and moved to Hannah, South Carolina, and he died on November 7th, 2003. Now, Bertha Belcher continued to make news. Like we said, she is quite the character.
Yes.
So, she complained about the U.S. spending millions of dollars bringing refugees into the country in May of 1975. And she also complained in July of 1978 about the city's decision to place a traffic light in a certain location because how dare they cause more traffic? So she just kept making news with all kinds of stuff until her death on January 11th, 1989. So Willard Belcher was placed in a correctional facility for the criminally insane in 1968, but he was freed sometime after Joe Leone was acquitted, and the reasoning for him being freed really hasn't been disclosed, so we don't really know what happened with that. He was charged with driving while intoxicated in December of 1972, and was placed in jail on November 18th, 1973, after he allegedly threatened the life of McCluskey. So he eventually died on March 7th, 1976, while in prison. Robert Prey was not released from prison after his testimony. He died of a heart attack in 1972. So Peter and Barbara's kids were reportedly placed in a rehabilitation facility after the murders to help them forget everything about their past. So they were pretty wild, before the murders, just had a lot of stuff going on as children, obviously. So there are no stories of them in their adult years, so it is possible that they changed their names and moved away, which, when you come from such a notorious family in a small town, that would make a lot of sense. So,
yeah.
We don't really know whatever became of them. We'll never know for sure who killed the Egans and how it went down, how many people were involved. I'm sure multiple people know what happened, but without any solid evidence to convict one or multiple people, that's all there is to it.
Yeah. And it's just crazy, and like I said, I've never heard of it, and I feel like really because the Egans live such a lifestyle where they committed a lot of crime, it's almost like they tried to find out who did it, but they also didn't put as much emphasis on it, compared to other cases we've done. So it kind of seems like the police were trying to figure it out, but also it was more like they were trying to get other people for it, for other things too, a bigger picture kind of thing. But it's just a crazy...
Especially since they thought it was all tied in, with the burglaries and stuff, so it's just kind of oh, well, that's what you get when you live a life of crime. It must be related to the crimes that you committed, which probably it was, but, we don't know for sure, and, it's your job to investigate everyone's murder, no matter what they did or didn't do for a living.
Yeah, but it's definitely a crazy story, and
yeah,
the poor Egans and their kids and all that. So
yeah, but definitely a crazy one with a lot of details that, like we said, neither of us have ever heard of. So we hope you learned something new about this New Year's Eve murder in 1964.
Yeah, I hope you found it interesting. It was a bit long. I thought for a while, I was like, this is going to be like a 2-hour episode. But
we trimmed it down to the important things. But, I mean, so much was happening that, we had to throw in all the details.
Yeah, there were so many details that I was like, I have to mention how they would switch drivers while driving. That's too interesting. I have to include that. It was just too much, good things.
And so many times it's so hard to get details. So like when we do find a book that has a lot of good details, we want to use them all because that's why we enjoy this.
Yeah, and this book had a lot of details. If you want like every single juror's name, it's in there. If you want great detail about Bill and Beverly J, like, I mean, he goes into a lot of detail, and it was really good. It was a little hard for research at times because, you know, you're trying to like make sure it had a little bit of an Anne Rule feel, but yeah,
And
it was really good.
And like Courtney said, it was written by a local author who had like a personal connection to it. So it probably has a lot of stuff that would appeal more to somebody local that, you know, was like, oh, like I know this area. I know that, you know, I feel like that happens a lot in true crime books where they like really describe like the location and the people and the town. And I'm sure it has a different feel when you like know the area, you know?
Yeah, and it definitely helps you kind of like picture it too, being like, okay, like I see in my head like where everything is.
Definitely. So, Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
So, my perk of the week is my new binge watch, Gilmore Girls. I have seen Gilmore Girls before, so I'm just rewatching. I think I've mentioned before, like I watch Netflix during work. It's a little easier for me to like put my phone up and I don't touch it as much, whereas if I listen to a podcast, I'm like listening to a podcast, scrolling through Facebook, not working. But
yeah, makes sense.
So I decided Gilmore Girls would be like my next watch, and it's been really fun, and I've really enjoyed watching it. I've gotten to watch it a lot because I've worked a lot of overtime, but it's very funny, and it's very like mostly light, and just it's very enjoyable. I really like it. So
I really like those like comforting shows that you can like watch over and over, you know, that like it just kind of has that, I don't know, just the nostalgia, but the comfort of like, okay, I don't need to watch every second because like I know what's going to happen, and it's you know, reassuring to just kind of have it like running, I guess.
And it's been a while since I've seen it, and so I've been like, oh yeah, I remember this now. It's like it comes back to me. I'm like, oh yeah, but
I always like that too.
Yeah, it's so fun. I love it. But yeah, that is my perk of the week. Jaclyn, what is yours?
So my perk of the week, Courtney, as you know, is that yesterday we finally moved into our new house. So
yay!
Super exciting. Hopefully the audio was better today. It may not be, as we have to like figure it out. I may be super loud. You may be hearing me turn down a lot because there's there's nothing in this room to kind of absorb the sound, and there's no background noise that I'm trying. So, you know, I don't know. We'll see. I tried to adjust my mic a few times. Hopefully it works well. Hopefully we'll get into a good groove. But I am recording like at my desk today, which is super exciting because normally I record in my tiny guest room, like we said, with the little foldable door, and I'm on like a TV tray with like my things all set up and arranged, and my setup takes way longer because I have to like move all of my stuff in there, and it's a whole ordeal.
Yeah, you can't move too much, it might all fall down.
And the cat's trying to come in and out, which he hasn't appeared in the entire time we've been recording, so I don't know what he's getting into, but and all three animals are loving the new house. They all love the windows. There's lots of big windows. They're all looking outside all the time. The dogs love playing outside. The cat really wants to play outside, so I saw the other day, Courtney, have you heard of a catio?
Like where you put like a screen up or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like a screened in like outdoor like cat playground kind of thing. And I was like, oh, maybe we should get Kobe one of those because he would love it so much.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. I've seen also where you can have like tunnels or whatever, but my cats are little demons and they'd probably get out somehow. So
But yeah, that is my perk of the week. I'm very excited to be here, and as soon as Courtney and I finish, I gotta go right back to unpacking like I've been doing all morning, because we have everything mostly here. There's still a few stray things at the old house that we have to pick up today, but now I'm just gotta get everything out of boxes and put away and all that fun stuff. And I also really want to get my Christmas decorations up because it's now December 13th and I haven't been able to put up decorations. So I told Andrew I'm going to leave them up till Valentine's Day because I want to enjoy them. So
hey, it's your house. You can do what you want now, right?
Exactly. Yesterday we were trying to go through the gate into the backyard and there was like this tree branch in the way and Andrew just broke it off and he's like, it's my house. I can do what I want.
You don't have to text someone, hey, is it okay if I...
Right. And then him and our friend that helped us move were drinking some beers outside, and Andrew was all excited to just like crush them and just leave it there. It's fine. I'm like, you know, you gotta move that for the dogs, right? Just let me live my life, okay?
just give me a second.
Enjoy this home ownership and do whatever I want. So yeah,
But yeah, I hope that you have a happy New Year's Eve that's coming up,
Yes.
and I hope you're safe. Please don't go out to like really crowded bars and like get COVID and like
No.
give it to everyone. Like, please don't do that.
don't do that.
Just, please don't. But if you want to tell us all about your New Year's resolutions, you can email us at caffeinatedcrimespod@gmail.com. You can send us a DM at caffeinatedcrimespod on Instagram. You can also send us a DM or a tweet at CAFCrimespod, CAFF Crimespod on Twitter. You can send us a good old fashioned messenger Facebook thing at Caffeinated Crimes Podcast. Or if you want to be like super, cool and like have it on like a VIP platform and we'll, hang out on Google Hangouts and give you pins and stickers and bonus episodes, you can do so at at patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes.
And if you want to start your 2021 with some free coffee and a sticker and a pin, you guys can head on over to Apple Podcast and leave us a preferably 5-star review, and we will pick a winner when we reach 50 of those, and the winner will receive a $10 gift card to a coffee shop of your choice, as well as a lovely Caffeinated Crimes sticker and pin. So we got lots of those that we really want to like give out to you guys, so go do the things.
Yeah, I had to buy 100.
Yes.
That was the minimum. So
yes,
come join.
And also, like Courtney mentioned on Patreon, you also get a sticker and a pin if you join the $10 tier, in addition to all of our bonus episodes and Google Hangouts and all kinds of fun stuff. So head on over there and do all those things.
Yeah, and in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.